Ah, Fred.
Good. How you doing?
Good. How are you, sir?
Good. Excellent.
Wow. We made that happen quick.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing this, Fred.
Oh, my pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So I'm in my basement. That's why it's Jughead's basement. I'm
Mhm.
surrounded by notes, which I compiled from last night till today.
Wow. Thanks for doing that.
Oh, no problem. And just so you know, these I like to have these be more of a dialogue, even though I have notes around and questions I could ask. I
Yeah.
feel like we're near the same age. We spend a lot of time in the same area. We'll probably be able to fling a lot
Yeah.
of it. But
Yeah.
very excited to finally get you on here. I know John Ross Bowie was trying to help us make this happen. He strong armed you a little bit, I think.
No, I mean he's such uh, a sort of cheerleader for the scene, and
Yeah,
for the
yeah, yeah.
days that, like anything that he says is a good idea. I'm all for it.
Yeah, he actually wrote yesterday to me. He goes, I said, well, I want to study Fred before I meet him, so I'm a little nervous. And he said, well, multi-instrumentalist, Trenchmouth were weird, older than the average SNL recruit, made the cover of Punk Planet one time. So my goal is to not touch on those. So
Okay. Yeah. Great.
yeah. I just heard an interview with you that you worked at Urbanzorbas
Yeah.
Cafe. Wow, that's what years was that? Like around 92, 93, 90, 80s?
No, it feels like it might have been more like 94, maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
yeah.
like somewhere in there. But 94, 95, maybe 94. But it was you know, one of the earliest memories of like what a coffee shop, like sort of you know, the coffee shop and that's sort of independently run
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
in the cool part of town. There were a couple in Minneapolis that I knew, but that was like the Chicago one, the Wicker Park one. I mean, of course, there were others, and of course, more opened up. But that was just sort of like my first experience of like, wow, this is like one of those, independent, cool coffee shops. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was fun. It was a huge space, I remember.
Yeah, I
And
thought I thought I was familiar with it, but I actually realized I used to go for carrot cake in a cafe right there, and there was actually earwax, which was like down the street
nearby,
on Damon. Yeah,
yeah, that was nearby.
yeah, yeah.
I remember that Urbanzorbas was also across the street from where this band Math used to rehearse and sometimes have shows. It was like an art space, but they also lived there.
Yeah.
And Math was like, because you couldn't really categorize them. They're very much a sort of art band, but I don't know if that's really a category. It's like
Yeah.
all bands, art bands. But
Avant-garde, if you want to
uh,
say.
you know, they weren't even avant-garde. It was like this other picture, like music that sounds like it could be from the 20s
Hmm.
or from the 90s, like a mix of like almost vaudeville, like organ,
Kurt Weill type stuff. Yeah.
yeah, simple percussion, but it's like a type of music that you don't see documented very much as part of a scene. Because I think lots of cities had that. They're sort of, that sort of artistic kind of band. And because it doesn't qualify in some ways as punk, they sort of always sort of, move it aside as something else. But I do feel like the band Math was an important part of that scene.
I
Even
actually
though it wasn't,
I think they were on a compilation that I knew of, like a
yes,
alternative rock compilation
yes,
there. Yeah. Oh
yeah.
yeah, there's one. Oh yeah, yeah. There's also that band. Oh, I can't remember their name right now. I'll have to go back and look and I'll fill it in later. That's what I do. I fill in things later.
Yeah, yeah.
Just to put a little information about me, during that time I was also in the Neofuturist. Too much light makes the baby go blind. Did you ever get to see
Oh,
that
yeah,
show?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah,
I did that for 20 years. So I also
yeah.
had more of an artsy crossover in music too. So I was able to walk those balances of the pop punk scene and the
Yeah.
more artsy bands that came out of that area.
There was one band who was later than this. They might be more towards 96 or something, called the Flying Lutenbachers. And they were like sped up, almost jazz.
Yeah,
They were like
yeah.
really, really great. Weasel Walter, it's his band. So that kind of like was part of that scene, but like a sped up version of it.
Yeah. When I looked up Urbanzorbas, because I couldn't quite remember where it was, and that was in the Flatiron building, which had a
Yeah.
recording studio where we recorded in like 93 EP called You Broke My Fucking Heart. But that's what I was like, I go, Urbanzorbas, why is that so familiar? And
Yeah.
yeah.
That was like, to me, it felt very central. It just felt very like that was I guess Earwax was that way too, but there just weren't many as there are now.
Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs, and I worked at a Gloria Jean's Coffee Beans, and when those around, there wasn't even cafes really per se. Paris, of course,
Yeah.
but like Chicago didn't have that type of thing. So when I moved into the city, it was the beginning of, like you're saying, it was the beginning of that excitement of hanging out in cafes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sort of hit Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you living in Wicker Park then?
Yep.
Ah, is
Yeah.
that the place to be? Did you gravitate there when you moved from New York to there?
Oh yeah. I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. Wicker Park was great. I was there long enough that like when we first were in Wicker Park, I remember the first place I moved in, when I first moved to Chicago, we moved to like Wrigleyville, and then like up, then also like up north a little bit, like that's all we could afford. But then like, as we figured out like the place to be was Wicker Park, I remember at first there was nothing there. There were like no restaurants or anything.
Mhm.
And there was a club we played called Club Dreamers.
Hold on.
Club Dreamers.
I wrote it down. It burned down. Yeah, we used to play there too. So I went on Facebook like 2 minutes before calling you, and I said, "What was the name of that place?" And so
Club Dreamers.
Yeah. So go ahead.
It was great. That was in Wicker Park, and I remember, like we'd play there, and there was just no place to eat. Like there was like we had to go back to somewhere else. But
yeah,
we saw some great bands there. I mean, I liked going to shows there, and we had some fun shows.
Yeah, I remember when we were in the suburbs when we first played there, and our friend Amy, who drove us, she was the one with the car, so she would drive us with our equipment there, and her car was stolen at that show. That's how I always remembered Club Dreamers, because that Wicker Park was pretty scary back then.
It was scary, and even in the 90s, as it because when we played Club Dreamers, that must have been 89 or something.
Yeah, 88 I played there, so yeah.
But even in the 90s, it was never quite 100% safe. Like it was still, there was, it was like still a city. I mean, it's a city, and you can get your car stolen or whatever. I've been mugged. I was mugged in Chicago, and
yeah.
So that's all. I mean, it was a while until it became like a really populated place, and
Yeah, we actually moved, when I moved into the city, we moved into an area that was even farther behind Wicker Park and becoming like an art area, which was Logan Square. And that was, that was pretty dangerous back then. I was there around 90. I think we moved into Logan Square, and I for years I didn't talk about it, but I was actually caught in a shootout between two gangs there.
Yeah.
And it was, I couldn't talk about it for years because I didn't want to glorify the incident at all. But I was walking home from the station, like the Belmont Blue Line station.
Yeah.
And some guy was running towards me. So I just like instinctively just turned around and started walking. And then he got shot, like right when I was standing right there.
Yeah, man.
And I just kept walking. That's the kind of thing you did. Then you learn to just keep walking,
Yeah. It's interesting, like you bringing up that, like, you don't want to talk about it because it's like not glorifying it. Because I agree with you. Like I'm also like, when we tell stories in terms of like music stuff, to talk about gang fights or getting mugged or getting shot, it does lean into romanticizing it a little bit.
Exactly.
So that it is a I know exactly what you mean. You're like, you don't want to be like, yeah, what a crazy place, there was gunfire everywhere. It's like, well,
yeah, I have a difficult relationship with that glorifying, because I think even like movies like Train Spotting, even though it's disgusting to watch, there's still a bit that's like glorifying and romanticizing that. Yeah,
definitely.
So I have a weird relationship with those type of movies.
Same here.
The only one that I think that did it well was, what's his name, Dream, I can't remember the name of it. It had the 3 different stories of heroin. It was the old woman that was addicted to TV shows. Oh, what's the name of that movie?
Oh, I think I know which one you're
And then the
talking.
woman who loses her arm, she used to dance on tables. I can't remember the name, but it was
Yeah.
Dream something. But that was the only movie to me that I gave me that horrible feeling you're supposed to feel when you're learning about like drug
Yeah.
abuse.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. Like I felt about that way about talking about sorry, I'm on the spot, so I just forgot his name. Who was the really extreme guy out of the East Coast?
G.G. Allen.
G.G. Allen. For years I couldn't talk about him because I was like, I learned from having a singer that's a shock value singer that the more you do that, that's what popularizes you. And then they don't really hear the music anymore. They don't, they get off on that. And for years I wouldn't talk about G.G. Allen because of that, for that very reason. And he tried to mace us when we came to a show, but
well,
I hold a little bit of grudge towards it.
Yeah. That'll cause a grudge.
I think it's fascinating that you came for work at Park. Did you have any? I know you started comedy a little bit after. You were probably doing comedy since you were little, but did you have the Second City approach at all, or did you find a different venue?
No.
I was surprised by that when I started studying you, that wasn't really.
Yeah, it all came from music. Like for some reason, that's
wow.
Yeah, that's where. I don't know. It went from there, and just little opportunities and doorways turned into other ones, and before I knew it, I was doing comedy. But yeah, that's just, I didn't go the sort of or stand-up comedy route. I didn't do.
Yeah, I wondered about that too, because since I watched your drummer special, which was a lot of fun. I watched it with my girlfriend's in from Japan. It was forever to try to get her here, and now we're trying to get me there, but the border's still closed. And just so people know, Abe just got shot and killed.
How wild is that?
Yeah, we sat crying a little bit this morning. So because Japan, a shooting in Japan, like, and this guy,
it's so mysterious, and someone who I feel like Abe is like recent. It's not like someone from the 80s. I'm like, that is a recent. A current politician. It is wild. I can't believe that happened.
Yeah. What's bizarre is just that day when we found out yesterday, we're having trouble trying to be together because we're not letting Americans into Japan right now. And she has to leave here next week. So I'm like, well, all you have to do is, talk to Abe. I'm sure he can get his people in.
Yeah.
Money talks, Nanako.
No, too late.
Now it's too late to talk to him. But that was a sidetrack. I thought you might be interested in the Japan connection, because I know when you were looking into your past history, you thought you were probably part Japanese, and it turned out Korean instead.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, pretty wild.
Do you consider? I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but you've been in some very American places, but it seems like you've such European and Eastern influences in your way of being too. Does that make sense to you at all? Like, do you feel like you are other than American in some ways?
Definitely. I mean, my parents are immigrants.
Yeah.
And and it's something that's like has always been a big part of my life. But that said, it's what America's about anyway. So exactly. in that sense, it feels very American.
Yeah. The way it should be seen, and we're losing a little bit of perspective on that.
Yeah. But I definitely, I think when I was a kid, I didn't appreciate it as much, but now as an adult, I embrace the fact that, there's all these cool places that my family came from.
Yeah. I had, I don't know if Mike Park from Asian Men Records, but I had him on the show, and because I was like, I didn't know how active like discrimination against Japanese or Korean people was these days. Like, and he shocked me with like things that people would yell at him while he was driving, and I know you have your structures are kind of, they look influenced otherly than or European.
Yeah.
Did you deal with that shit at all?
No. And I grew up in a sort of a very sort of Italian American a suburb in New York.
Yeah.
And my dad looks Asian, you know, he looks Asian, and we're, you know, we're of Latin American descent, and we really, I gotta say, no one hassled my dad, no one hassled me. I look very different, not very different, I look kind of different, but no, I think the most thing that I ever got hassled for was having a mohawk. That's the only time where people would like shout things at me or throw things at me.
Yeah.
But no, it turned out to be, we had a very, like, we grew up in a really good neighborhood, and a neighborhood that really embraced us.
Yeah. That, I mean, that reminds me of a little short story of, I always talked about myself being a Puritan in the punk scene, like the one who, I had long hair when everyone else was doing mohawks. And my mom even said to me, John, you only have long hair because you're in a band. I go, Mom, I'm the only one with long hair in my scene. But I remember I was walking with an old girlfriend who had a child, and the kids saw these couple with punk haircuts, and they were like, what is your kid staring at? And I was like, well, you kind of do that to stand out. I mean, I think it's okay that a kid is staring at your cool mohawks. I always thought there was kind of like an irony of that.
I mean, I think it's something that like some punks kind of liked. Some punks liked kind of saying, why is everyone staring at me? Just it's just like, clearly that's, you know, what the desire is, but just, you know, that's just a part of being a punk, I think.
Yeah. Did you have a mohawk before you were in a band, or
No, it was after. I was in a hardcore band called the KGB, and
you know, it's also a band from Germany that I did their show in the 80s with Zero Boys and Operation Ivy in Chicago.
Oh, nice. Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Goes way back.
But I heard that you were in a band called KGB, and there was a few of them all over the world.
I'm sure. Yeah. But and we were just pretty much a high school band anyway. I think whatever, 6 shows or something. But like, but my mohawk wasn't like a hardcore mohawk. I wasn't like that. That's not what I was emulating. For me, it was very specifically Bow Wow Wow. Like I was so into Bow Wow Wow, and I was just like that. I really wanted it to look like Matthew Ashman, you know. So
yeah, that's right. You're an 80s child too. I had that crossover where I grew up with 70s brothers and sisters that were a little older than me, but I inherited a lot of that too. But I'm such an 80s child.
Yeah. But that's cool that you had long hair. Like, I think like, you don't need me to tell you this, but like, you know, the idea that like some punks had long hair is like, makes so much sense to me. Like, I loved how Dinosaur Jr. looked, and Henry Rollins, and like, that's how it's supposed to be. I even felt like, I know they had short hair, but like that Minutemen and Husker Du looked like, you know, I feel like that's the look of what. It's not just like the uniform that a punk is supposed to have. Like those bands really were like, that's should be the real deal.
You know, and you just mentioned Minutemen, and Mike Watt is probably the most punk person I've ever met, just by nature. Like he doesn't even have to think or talk punk, and he's like, that documentary of was it called? Econo? Is it the
We Jam Econo?
We Jam Econo. Wow, I got to interview him right after that, and we cried together over Boone.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about two people that got so close that one of them passing away. You just never get over that. And there's no getting over something like that.
Of course not. Of course not. Yeah. But agreed about Mike Watt. I mean, he's I just feel like I wish there was a system where we could just give him like you know, a medal or something, you know. Because he's just done so much, and he's like been so important to so many people. I'm just like, can't we just make a trophy? Can't we just make a one-time trophy that we just make just for him to be like, hey, you meant a lot to, or you mean a lot to a lot of us.
I'm going to write that down, Fred, because I think you and I could probably arrange a trophy for Mike.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can even call it Trophy for Mike Watt.
Yeah.
I actually really am writing that down. There, wrote it down.
Great.
Yeah. the other story I want to say is I was thinking of like Oregon and that area and Seattle. I drove in the 90s. My sister did this stupid audition for Soundgarden where she was supposed to, David Letterman was doing those stupid human tricks at the time. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
And Soundgarden did a contest where you could win a dinner with Soundgarden if you do this stupid trick. And my sister was kind of like a rebellious kid then, and she just didn't know what to do. So she stood on stage, drank some flammable alcohol, and spit fire like Gene Simmons. And she got it. She won. So she won dinner with them.
Wow.
And they loved her so much, like Chris Cornell, that they actually invited her to Seattle to work for them. And she knew Nirvana and all those. She's like a really likable person. Yeah. But I drove her all the way out there. So that's my connection with Seattle. And then I guess what I'm getting at, this is like a personal thing, Fred. My sister is one of the most influential people to me. Amazing with people, like Chris Cornell loved her, like, and when he died, she was devastated. But if you could just say hello to Gene right now.
Hello, Gene. You really made Jughead's life much more exciting and better, and he looks up to you and he's proud of you. So hello.
Thank you very much, Fred. Have you ever done I often talk, it actually appeared in my book because I drove her all the way there and then dropped her off and drove all the way back. So I drove like 50 hours there and 50 hours back. But to me, that was not a lot, because with touring, that was kind of like your thing you did. You just got good at driving around a lot. Are you much of a driver yourself?
I love driving. And when Trenchmouth went on tour, I drove as much as possible. I love driving, and I still do. And I loved driving the van. But it's funny, like running an errand like that, the one you described, I think that's just something we all did. Like we just liked these like errands that took a long time. You dropping her off is like, that makes so much sense to me. I'm like, oh yeah, I would have done the same. I know that feeling. Like driving someone I have a friend actually who I drove to her 10-year high school reunion, and it was in Detroit, just a friend of mine. And it's just, from Chicago to Detroit, and I didn't even go to the reunion. It was just like a ride. Like, but you just did stuff like that, like, oh, you need a ride to Detroit? Fine. Give me the directions, and then you do it. Not a thought. It's just nothing.
There's a famous one in the Lookout Records world where, Krumshine? You familiar with? Yeah. But their band imploded in Florida, and they called me and Ben up at my house in Mount Prospect. And they needed someone to drive and pick them up. So we just hopped in my friend's Trans Am and drove all the way to Florida and brought them back to my house for a week. It's kind of like a famous story, because then their new bass player drove up from California to Chicago in a little teeny, I don't even know what's, like a Volkswagen or something. And these are tall guys. And all four of them got into this teeny Volkswagen and duct taped their equipment to the outside of the. So as they I was at the end of my driveway watching them drive off for the rest of their Krumshine, the only tour they ever did. And it was like the bottom of the car was hitting the ground. But it wasn't even like a second thought at that time. As years later when I thought about it. But back then I was like, this is what we do.
Perfectly fine.
Do you have any of your harrowing tour stories? Do you have any that you like to tell people?
Let me try to think of one that I don't tell people, just because if I start going like, this happened on tour, I could feel myself just sort of going through the motions.
The motions, and thank you for that, because I try not to go through motions on this.
So the one thing that comes to mind, there's two. One is that our first tour, we didn't know how to rent a van, but a friend of ours did, and he sort of rented us a van. And we just pictured this, van, like a cargo van, but he showed up with a minivan. And there were so many of us, but it's not his fault. It's just that's, we're young. We don't know what we're doing. And we put last minute, we just were like, okay, what are we going to do about this problem? Our equipment does not fit. And so we put all the equipment on top, and we used a tarp. We sort of tied a tarp, and like, when someone's good at tying a tarp down. So nothing disastrous happened. Like the equipment never fell, none of that stuff. We made our shows, we did it. But there was just no like logic put to like, do we need this much equipment? It's like, drum cases and stuff like that. No part of our brain in our early 20s was like, why don't we not have drum cases? Why don't we find a smaller amp? Why don't we ask to borrow a kick drum? None of that. Like all we think is like our equipment. And then we throw all this equipment on top and it's just this added weight. And so that's my first memory of like a mistake that was like, also like on the drum cases, we'd spray paint stencil the name of the band, as if anyone's gonna mistake it, for their own kick drum. Like, no, it'll be fine if it doesn't say anything on it.
Yeah.
It's sort of like just mimicking bigger bands, like you need to put your name on there. No, you do not.
Yeah. That reminds me, I won't say the state or the band, but we were playing in New York State, one of the smaller cities there. And we accidentally maybe have packed one of the drummer's instruments or something. And we knew we had it. That's what it was. And we stayed at his house that night. And we even said, we have some extra stuff, but we don't know whose it is. And they were all drunk and they're like, oh, we don't know. So on the road, we actually get a call from them, because what you did was you'd call your voicemail back home because you didn't have cell phones. And he got a lawyer to sue us for stealing his equipment. It's like, what? It's like one cymbal stand. And we didn't, we even asked him about it. It's just a story I always remember about how ridiculous people could get sometimes about that.
And also just how like, maybe it's the days when you just had $0 or how like,
exactly. Yeah.
Where like equipment was so valuable. Like it was just, it's just like the only thing you could afford and you finally had it.
Yeah.
I just also remember cymbal stands in general. Like if I needed a new one, I just had to wait. I wasn't like, I'm going to run down and get a cymbal stand.
No.
I don't have $79. I just don't have it. And I'm going to use my old cymbal stand because this is all I have.
Yeah. I got a Westone guitar when I was young, and it was like $100 guitar. And it was at a record store that I got it. And I used that throughout most of the Screeching Weasel records. It was by the time I had pen caps, and because I lost the bridge, so I used Bic pen caps for that. Yeah. And I actually fell at a show one time in Texas, and the jack broke. So I actually wired my like 20-foot cord into my guitar and didn't use a case anymore. I just wrapped it around the guitar.
That's exactly what I mean. Like this thinking that's like, it's not real troubleshooting. It's not like really thinking things through and like get this repaired.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's another, no, just like tape it down.
Yeah. Well, the thing is too, you're just, you're driving because it's hard to book shows back then too. Once again, you're not like going in an order. You're not well known enough to like book a tour in order. So you're going from this side of Texas to that side of Texas and back again. So you're driving and playing. You don't even have time. Like we didn't even have time to go to stores and stuff. I tried to make my strings last. They'd be all dirty and filthy by the time I got done with the tour.
Yeah. And anything was acceptable when you talk about those distances. Yeah. Like I remember any show was fine. Like, what? It's at 4 p.m. At some parking lot, and it's not really a show, but they're gonna make it a show, and it's actually,
oh my God, that brings back memories.
So many things that you're like, you accept as a show. Where like, where is the wherewithal to be like, maybe that's too far to drive for that, but oh my God, we would take, fifth band on the bill.
Yeah.
And just show up and play whenever.
Yeah, we actually, Weasel, one of the reasons I thought we did well, but it made it hard, is that we had these unbelievable rules for a band that were just starting out, but we couldn't play after 10 and we had to headline. So we played a lot of shows in front of like 2 people, but we never actually went through that. And that's why people are like, what famous bands did you guys meet? And I was like, well, we never did, because we always playing these like teeny shows. We are friends with bands that became famous, you know, like Green
Yeah.
Day, Operation Ivy, Rancid, all that. But
Yeah.
I never played with like famous bands because we had this weird rule. But I'm pretty proud of it. It was really difficult though.
Yeah, it's a tough
You know,
one.
we play in Detroit in front of like 3 people, you know,
Yeah.
or even New York, we played down the street from CBGB's. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sonic Youth was playing there, and we were playing down the street in this basement where it was. I don't know if you know Jim Testa from Jersey Beat, but it was him and 2 actually Japanese couple that accidentally ended up at the show.
I've had a million of those shows. A million of the shows of like, guess who's playing down the street? Guess who's playing tonight? I mean, I'm just like, it almost feels like that was the norm, was always like, you know, guess who's playing tonight, or guess who just played yesterday, which also counts as like, no one's coming tonight.
We had that with a whole tour. Danzig was 1 day ahead of us at every venue we went to. And everyone was like, I would have been there, but you know, I blew all my money at the Danzig. Yeah. Okay.
All right. On to the next city. Yeah.
I'm glad I could relate to this stuff with you. I haven't been able to do this in a while with
good. It's such a funny memory. It's like, even though it was, you know, it could be difficult, at the same time, I remember us laughing a lot as a band.
Yeah.
So that stuff was all a drag, but God, we had a great time. Like there wasn't a gamble. It wasn't like, hey, we invested all this money. We didn't have any money anyway.
No.
So it was just like kind of an excuse for friends to do stuff together.
Yeah, I think that was kind of, I don't know. I like to say unique, but I don't know. But I've talked to a lot of people, and that was fairly unique for our decade of punk rock, that it was this community. Because after, you know, once Green Day broke, I started noticing on the road that you would have bands with, you know, vans that their parents bought them, and they were expecting that their next record was going to be on a major. But for us, you're right. It was like, we were just doing what we could to get out of our own town. Like, we were sitting at we were invited to Jeff Pizzotti's bachelor party from Naked Ray Gun when we just started out as a band, because our drummer worked with their drummer at Kinko's, which was, as you know, you probably would spend the whole night there all the time.
Yeah.
But it was us at this table, and then at the other table they were playing poker, which none of us played, but it was Effigies, Articles of Faith, and Naked Ray Gun, and us like at the kids table, and we were like, we're different from these guys. We look up to these guys, but we're so different. And Naked Ray Gun would hardly ever left Chicago, and we were like, that's the first thing we'll want to do is get out, you know, see the world. And that seemed to be in that breed of our age, that it was like that, let's just get out and, you know,
and Chicago's a great place for that. Because the surrounding areas are like a real adventure, you know. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Indiana, downstate Illinois. It's pretty exciting to like, you know, Iowa. That's like, those are really cool places to play. I'm really glad that Trenchmouth had that as its surrounding areas. I really romanticized those drives, those flat drives, you know, there's like no hills. So it was awesome to get out, and not very far. You go to Michigan. We went to Kalamazoo a bunch, Indianapolis.
Our recording guy was in, Mass Giorgini was in, from the studio called Sonic Iguana, was in Lafayette. So it's a small town. I mean, it's a college town, but
but they were awesome.
Toxic Reasons were from there, like I said, Zero Boys. The whole Midwest was pretty powerful, I think, in those days.
And friendly as places to go. Like go get something to eat. It just felt fun. The drives felt fun. But going back to what you were saying before, I don't know who's going to have the energy to do this, but someone has to write a book about the role Kinko's played on American punk rock. I think Kinko's really deserves royalties for how much it just solidified punk rock across the country.
Flyers, zines at the time, you know, zines where everyone was doing zines, but that's how you found out about everything. There was no internet. So,
and flyers, the flyer situation, like every city had these flyers. I mean, you know, with the amount of the time we spent at Kinko's, it was just like, it's almost like band practice. Like there's band practice and there's Kinko's.
Yeah, we would go to the one, Eric Spicer, I'm pretty sure, yeah, Eric Spicer and our drummer worked at the one on Clark by Belmont. It's gone now.
I way know it.
Yeah, yeah.
I really spent a lot of time there.
Yeah, yeah. It was weird. It was because we weren't really much drinkers, and even we were probably before 21. So it really was like a place you went to hang out too. It was open 24 hours, and you were night people because you're in a band. So
yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. One of the keys was to get someone in your band to work at Kinko's. That was like that was the loftiest goal.
Yeah, that's the goal for sure.
One of the things that I have is a structured question, and because the limited studying I did, I really dug that drummers special that I watched on Netflix, and that was made for Netflix, right?
Yeah.
Was it released as an album too? I read, or was
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But my question is, I guess, was there a difference to you to perform talking about drummers with amazing famous drummers in the audience compared to like working with famous stars like as an actor? Was there a nervousness that was different to you in that, or did you not even think about that?
It's a different kind of feeling. It's not nervousness. It's more like, oh, finally.
Oh, really?
It's more like
I almost said hontoni. Sorry, that's my Japanese. I talk Japanese half the day. I went hontoni. I'm sorry. Yeah. So
it's like finally I get to, because I came up trying to be, a successful drummer, right? So like touring and touring and touring, and it's like my dream was always to meet these drummers and to,
Wow.
So it's like I never got to, and then finally I get to do stuff with them.
Wow. Did you feel like a fanboy at those things? Do you allow yourself? Yeah.
I always do. Like I am friends with my favorite drummer ever. Can you imagine texting with your favorite drummer?
Wow.
It blows my mind. The 14-year-old me would be shocked at being friends with, not just meeting, but being friends with a hero.
Wow. I don't want to lose that question. It was a good one. Was it a goal of yours to finally get to a point where you could do a show on drumming, or was it pretty much everyone said, yeah, Fred can do that? Or was that like something in your mind to do for a while?
It was more that like I was supposed to do a stand-up special for Netflix.
Yeah.
And I had some material and I was working on stuff, but then as a sort of side project, I've been doing a little bit of like stand-up for drummers, not a full show, but just like would talk about, hey, this is just for drummers. And then as I was coming up with the Netflix one, the drumming stuff is the only material that had like a sort of like drive.
Mm-hmm.
There was a drive to it. I was like, the material came quickly, came without effort, without question. The only question is like, is there enough of an audience to understand these very specific jokes?
Right.
I explained it to this guy, Robbie Pra at Netflix, and he took the gamble. He was like, go for it. Just try it. Let's see what this is like. At least it's a good solid hour of material. So it was a little bit of a gamble, and then it worked out.
Yeah.
Because I think as time goes, people who have a specific interest can find something just for them. So it it makes sense now.
Yeah. And I think they were pretty smart with the filming, I would say too. I'm not really good at watching editing, but sometimes I notice that like, even when you're doing in jokes for drummers, if you give a little bit of, look over at the audience and seeing them appreciating it or understanding or even questioning it gives that audience who don't know that world, like a little bit of insight into what you're talking about, and adds a whole nother level of interest for them for something they don't know about. So I thought was whoever handled that, I thought did a really good job with that.
That's Lance Bangs. Lance Bangs has worked on some great stuff, and he's a friend of mine as well.
Yeah, that was pretty great. My other question, I was fascinated watching you during that, is I think as an actor myself too, that I am one of those where if I put on the costume, there's a whole nother level of understanding that's almost instinctual to the character that I might not have known in rehearsals when I didn't have costumes. So I
Yeah.
try to get like Nicolas Cage. He always has to have a hat in a movie, because it connects him to it. I had wondered if there's a little bit of feeling like that in going behind those drum sets. Like, I thought there's really interesting of you of taking on those styles where like, would you say all of those different styles you did behind those drums were styles you learned, or is there something added once you're sitting behind like a drum?
It kind of goes the other way around. It's kind of more like, what can I do? So I think, what do I know about every decade of drumming? It's limited. It's limited, right? Because I don't know certain styles of music well enough. I don't know enough, for example, about the history of reggae drumming. I mean, I love dub music and I love those drummers, but I don't know how to play it well enough to go into. So there are areas that I'm like, well, before I start doing, I only pick what I know. So that's where I start. So I go, what do I know from the 20s? They do those kind of, silent movie effects. What do I know from the 30s? I don't know, kind of like that swishy sound. So it's more like, first I pick what I know, then I line up the drum kit, and that's when I can. So it seems like I'm going through it with ease, but it's like what I already know. So it's almost like the equivalent of like taking people through words you already know, and it seems like wow, But there's a lot of music that I don't. I love Latin music, right? I love salsa. I love samba. I love Latin rhythms. I don't play them well enough to have gone through Latin percussion all the way through kit to kit. So I just don't do it.
Right. But you give the appearance of having all of the knowledge of all of the knowledge.
And which is fine. I mean, it's
well
just
played, Fred.
It's more like I should have prefaced the whole thing by saying like, this is what I know of 30s music, 50. But it's just basically rock and roll, and like, it's basically rock and roll, really, with like a little bit of jazz from the 30s,
Yeah. Did you ever, here's a weird question you probably couldn't answer. Maybe I'll have to go to an expert on the selling of drums. But what do you think happened with those electronic drums? Why didn't they? I know you have a soft spot in your heart for those, and I do too. Thinking of like,
do you mean like whatever happened to Simmons drums?
Yeah.
They became like everything, like an iPod Classic. Bigger and more cumbersome than we'd imagined. So Simmons drums are actually kind of thick and kind of big, and it's just a pad. So other companies came along and were able to go like, actually, we can make it more, easier to play with a mesh head. We can make them smaller, we can make them more manageable, and we can make more a variety of sounds. Simmons had a pretty, now I love Simmons, but after a while, you just have to, which I hate, but you have to keep reinventing your own invention so that people can, otherwise Roland came along and was like, we've got these Roland drums. I mean, they just have so many variations and they're so light. And there's like a library of sounds. So it's just evolution of those things.
Also reminds me of I remember going through the period in the 80s or early 90s when it was between VCR and beta, and you had different like video stores that were backing beta and VCR. And there's like economists that talk about the sort of the chaos theory involved in that. Like, it was an unpredictable thing that eventually led to VCRs being more promoted and then made better and better, even though beta out of the gate was supposed to be like better. I don't know.
Yeah, and it was smaller. But who knows? I mean, it's like it is a chaotic thing, but it's like the same, for whatever reason that in England and Ireland they drive on the left or whatever on the right. That whole like, who knows? Like, who knows? People just choose things, and it just something takes or something doesn't. And I'm sure Simmons could have had an opportunity to keep evolving, but who knows?
Yeah. When I saw those drums, I don't even know if they used them, but it reminds me of a band that I had that passion for, is the like Thompson Twins, who are all into those mechanical drums and instruments. I love that band. Still to this day, I'll listen.
They're great.
Yeah.
You know, I saw them recently, and maybe 2018, 2019, and they had so many hits. I was like, that's a hit, that's a hit. Where you remember for some reason, because of MTV, you have an image of just hearing like one or two songs, but no, they kept going. And
Yeah. And even if they have Wish You Were Here, which is in 16 Candles.
something like that. Yeah.
And that doesn't sound anything like them. And I remember going, wow, that's right. That's Thompson Twins too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think,
but what's weird too is that like, so at the time, I remember we thought it was so digital and so computerized, and now it's so analog. It just sounds like, because I think people are actually hitting pads or hitting drums.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's not as sequenced as I remember.
Yeah, I remember with when we were in that period with Weasel, where there's, what were those called? There's those VCR versions, and there's the different, we were playing to like 7 different VCRs. They like came after the reel-to-reels, and during our period there was that trying to stick to the reel-to-reels, like you had to pay for that. We did Uber Studios, which was a place where we had to import an old like reel-to-reel to get the work done. And I think that's fascinating of that. I don't know, that punk is revolutionary, but part of it was there was something permeating it that was trying to keep it contained in some ways too.
Yeah,
it's like in the dichotomy. I'm always interested in like contradictions or dichotomy. And
I know,
like
but
contradiction.
that's just how it happens. Yeah.
That actually leads me to a question I was thinking while watching a drummer thing. And I ask a lot of comedians this, coming from and knowing a lot of people that make a living into that, is that you're passionate about these, especially about the drummer one, you're passionate about these things, and yet you're able to make fun of them. That's, being a comedian myself too, I have a hard time doing that. I am not a very good satirist. Or I was talking to Perry Grip the other day from Nerf Herder, I talked about that ability to mock culture or something. And do you have anything to say, Fred, of that, being an artist who balances on that, loving something but also being able to make fun of it, and like what that does to like an internal the internal workings of a person? Because
it's almost
become
like,
pretty well known for that, I mean, in many ways.
But I'm not even thinking of it as making fun of it. It's almost like,
yeah,
I'm celebrating it, I'm repeating it, I'm like having fun with it.
Yeah.
But I try, my tone isn't like, isn't this dumb? Although even that's probably fine too. But
dumb
it's like,
is okay too.
But it's almost like, I always think of it as like an impression. That's all it is. It's like if someone does an impression, you could see it as making fun of them, but it's also just celebrating them too. So
yeah,
for me, it's it's about celebrating all those style drumming things, or isn't this annoying when this happens?
Yeah.
If you drop a wing nut on your cymbal stand, that kind of thing.
I can't remember who it was. I asked some writer of comedy if they ever felt like they just took one too far, where it was just plain making fun of something and they felt bad. Have you had anything like that? Like in like Saturday Night Live or in Portlandia or just any kind of situation?
What's weird is it's less that like the reason I would feel bad is that something would be seen as making fun of. So it's more that I'm like, no, it's not what I meant. I meant that, I love this thing.
Yeah.
In the stand-up special, I say that I don't like jazz, which is not true. I love jazz. I love it. But it's almost like a comedian would make fun of, I don't know, tapas, food from Spain or something, it's, you're just kind of messing around. So, but it's not that I would feel bad. It's more that I'm like, hey, I'm just trying to have fun with something.
Yeah. I thought some of even the stuff they allowed in that Netflix series was some looks to drummers that were like, that's not what it's like.
Yeah. Because it should be like a discussion, not a political rally.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty great. It was also cool to see Trey on there. I think I sent you a text once that we have a famous show that Larry from Lookout Records did, when we drove out there, we played with Mr. T Experience, Green Day when they first started. And Trey was actually in Larry's band, The Lookouts, at that time. And we played up at that mountain, the top of I forgot the name of the place, but it was like, I call it Lookout Mountain. But we played down the street from Jerry Garcia. So no one showed up to the show. But Jerry kicked out some like people that were too much on LSD, even for Jerry Garcia,
Wow.
and sent them to our show. So there's this famous show that no one was at with Mr. T Experience,
Wow.
Preaching Weasel, Green Day, right before Trey was in the band, and he was, and he got asked, I think, right after that. And there was no one there, but these, like, I remember them, these drugged out hippies that were more fucking weird than we could have ever been, dancing in this non-pit. So I just wanted to share that story with you because
that's so cool.
It's one of those memories that I just actually had Larry on the show and we talked about that crazy experience.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that things happen that way and you don't even realize it at the time. Yeah.
My sister said, we're going to wrap. It's like 10 more minutes. Is okay with you?
Sure.
Yeah, great. My sister said she worked at the Middle Eastern Cafe in Boston for a while. And I think you had a drumming act that you would tour for that, like a band, comedian band. She said she saw you play there before.
She's right. But it's an early version of that's an early thing. What did I do?
I tell you, she's been a fan for a long time. So
that's really, really nice.
That's one of the reasons I got you on.
Oh, that's so nice. It wasn't like the drumming special, but there was it's like when I was starting to do live stuff with comedy. And God, what did I do? It was early days of doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, I thought she said it was like a South American influenced drum beat thing. I'm getting her wrong. She knows exactly what it was, but
it might have been,
I'm getting it wrong.
As part of my act, I might have done Felicito, like this Venezuelan tamale.
Yeah, I think she had mentioned that.
So that might have been part of it. But yeah, those early days of me doing like performance comedy.
When I don't even know if this can be answered, Fred, but when did you go from like, my God, I'm a really good musician, which I think you are, I've learned, but my God, I'm a performer. I'm a actor, comedian, performer. Was that a slow transition, or did you have
fast,
come to Jesus moment?
It was in 98.
Yeah.
And I did this that South by Southwest video where I was interviewing bands and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think around then the reaction to the video of me interviewing bands, and this is VHS days, was more instant than with Trenchmouth, right? And so somewhere, because I remember, Lounge Acts in Chicago, I showed the video at Lounge Acts and people really turned out for it to show a video. And right then, all of a sudden, I was like, I think, I could feel it. I was like, if I do comedy, something happens. Yeah. Whereas when I was playing drums, stuff happened kind of, but it wasn't with the same intensity.
This may be, it sounds like almost an insult, but it isn't. Do you feel like somehow you keyed into a comedy that was a little bit more, not conventional, but more, I don't know, acceptable than your music was?
Definitely. My relationship with music is I love it. I love drumming. I will always love drumming. I'll consider myself a drummer, but my relationship with music, I don't know that it was it's nice of you to say that I'm a good musician, right? I think I'm okay. I think I could do some cool stuff, but I'm not I don't, you remember Tortoise, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
John McIntyre, John Herndon. I remember the way that they approach music, the way they approach drumming, how your drums are recorded. That's what is a reminder to me that I'm maybe I wasn't meant to be one of those drummers, because they have an ear for it. I don't know how to tune a drum. I tune them up as high as they go, and that's fine with me. So when Trenchmouth would record, The rest of the band would stay for the mixing, right? With the engineer and like just getting the mix right.
Yeah.
I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I was like, I don't care.
Man.
I don't know. Sounds fine. Well, make the drums loud. I don't know. As long as that snare drum's in there. And I think people who are truly brilliant at drumming and who have that thing, they stay. And they practice and they know how to tune a drum. I mean this with respect to myself. I'm so happy to be a drummer, but I'm not one of those guys. So comedy comes to me so much easier, where I do want to spend time on it, where I do want to like think of what a joke is and what works and what doesn't, where I do want to be in the editing room.
Yeah.
Music, my relationship, I'm so happy to be in it, but I am, as life has turned out, I'm just like, I'm not one of those people who like can even discern the difference between a mix. I'm like, I don't know. I hear the bass, sounds great.
Wow.
So that's all. It's almost like it's like a career change that made sense. I was like, clearly I'm not John, because I imagine John Herndon and John McIntyre to be like that to me. Like those are the real, like the way they approach drums. I'm like, I'm not one of those guys, and they should do that. And maybe I should start doing comedy.
Wow. Do you think that goes for all? I mean, you play all different instruments. Do you think I had wondered? Perry Grip admitted to me that I was picking at him. He admitted that part of he tries to be a collective, but he says part of him wants that love of an audience because he feels not loved. I was wondering whether maybe being a drummer didn't give you that. And
it didn't.
Yeah.
But the happy ending is then after all of that, right? Let's say I, gave up being in a band. Oddly, I ended up being in front of an audience playing drums, doing comedy. It worked itself out. So my dream of being Green Day, it didn't go that way. But all of a sudden, the special that you saw was like, there I was doing comedy with the kid. So it oddly worked out. Anyway.
Wow. I just had an interview with Victor from Violent Femmes, one of my favorite bands of all time. And he's doing a lot of interesting stuff that doesn't get much play, but he talked about, I just forgot what we were talking about. Oh, damn. I didn't just want to bring his name up to name drop, but
well, you were talking about getting the love from audiences from playing the drums.
Yeah. No, I lost it. Yeah.
That's all right.
I'll email you and get back to
right.
That must mean that I'm wrapping it up with you. But I'm going to look at my notes because I love to do this at the last end of it to make sure I'm seeing everything. Oh, there was one thing I didn't even realize. It's interesting how sometimes our fans know more about us than we do. Like I'll often be approached by someone that asks me about something. I go, you already know more about it than I do. And I heard that you were on one of the Underdog, which I helped. Russ Forster was on the show too, who started Underdog, and I'm friends with Doug. And you were on the Achtung Zwei compilation.
Oh yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, we weren't on that one because we actually produced the first Achtung one. And then I went back and looked who was on it, and we were on it with you. So
isn't that funny when that happens? You're like, oh, we never played that show. I'm like, oh, that's right, we did play that show.
Yeah. That's right. Go ahead if you wanted to say something about. I thought about that because Doug Ward lived in that area too. He's like one of the first punks to move to like Wicker Park and live in that area.
But I love that compilation.
Yeah,
it's such a cool compilation.
Yeah. There's actually were you familiar with Gage? They seem like they were doing.
No, I remember Gage. Yeah.
Gub Scott Conway has been in my band, even in Black House, for like 17 years. He's the guy who started.
Oh wow! Tell him hi.
Brilliant guy, like inspired like Jazz Freddy and a lot of those Promise Rings bands that went on to be bigger. But also on there was our drummer was in this band Ivy League that became the Screeching Weasel drummer that made the famous lineup. And so that compilation is like, oh, I didn't even know. Oh, there's Fred's band. There's my favorite guitarist ever, who's now one of my best friends band. Yeah. And our drummer that made us famous is in another band. That's awesome. Just on that compilation. So
that's a cool compilation.
Yeah. I don't think Underdog, they were like the Underdog. Basically, they didn't get a lot of credit for what they had done. And
No, but they were
Looking
pretty
back
great.
at some of those comps, you're like, wow, those were like bands that were really taking risks in those days.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, Fred.
Underdog. Yeah.
Let me just last let them eat jelly beans. I don't have to say anything about that. We both love that compilation. That's been said already. Fred, you can go.
You did great research, and I'm glad we worked out getting to do this.
It's such a pleasure to talk to you. I love people that in the punk scene that have gone on to do amazing other things and still sort of value that the aesthetic that they learned from that. So
I appreciate
I really respect that in you. So
well, thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. And it's great. I'm glad we got to talk.
Yeah. Thanks, Fred.
Sure. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.